All right, we're here for another episode of Wednesday Wisdom with yours truly, Mazi Mutafa, Executive Director of Words Beats in Life. Let me begin by saying proceed at your own risk. I am not here to promote industry standards, but rather to share my own experience as a nonprofit executive for the last 23 years. Take what's good for you and reject what doesn't feel right. More than anything, I want to engage with my peers and community members about how we do this important work we do to change the world for the better. Uh, Before I get into today's topic, if it's your first time on the channel, please subscribe and like. And you can leave comments or questions as this is being broadcast live. But more important than that, I would love to invite teaching artists who live and work in the DMV to put a comment in the chat. I want to meet you and potentially look at working with you. All right. So for today's topic, I want to talk about uh, donors and partners in supporting the work that you do. This is one of the most important things that most people who decide to start a business, particularly a nonprofit business or a hybrid business, focus on trying to do, finding financial support to be able to make the thing that they're trying to do possible. A lot of people would frame this as a kind of donor or partner development. What's important in developing donors and partners? Well, the first thing is to recognize that every single person that gives you a dollar, whether that is a friend or a family member, a local business, a nonprofit, a foundation, or a local company, is a partner. They're a partner in trying to make happen the vision that you have for an activity, for a program, for your business. And so recognizing that they're not just a contributor from a financial point of view, but they're also potentially an amplifier of the work you do. When I began Words Beats in Life, I talked about this in a previous episode. I, on one level, was fortunate slash unfortunate because the opportunity that presented itself was the result of a crime emergency that happened in Washington, D.C. And so, because I had told a friend of mine, Retta Morris, that I had been running a nonprofit and running a program at a local recreation center, when an opportunity crossed her desk to be able to activate programming in recreation centers across Washington, D.C., I was one of the people that she thought of. So she reached out to be able to make our very first grant possible. Before Retta, though, there was a sister by the name of Rashida Govan, who had been an advisor to the work that I was doing as an undergraduate at the University of Maryland, who, after I graduated and she graduated from grad school, she went on to work at the Community College of Baltimore County, the Essex campus, and she became a student life programmer. She was a participant in the very first conference that we did, so she had seen the work that I had done as an undergraduate student leader and believed that the things that we were doing at the University of Maryland would also make a difference at the community that she was working to help empower at Baltimore County Essex campus. And so Rashida reached out. She was the very first contract that we ever secured. Why is that important? Rashida wasn't just a person that purchased our services blindly. She was aware of the work that we had done. She was aware of the work that we were trying to do in Washington, D.C. and beyond. And because she saw us as a viable partner, she reached out to be able to help enhance the work that she was doing at the Community College of Baltimore County. Why do I tell this story? Well, the truth is because each of those examples are people who were just part of my own social circle, who I was just telling about the work that I was doing. Telling your story, especially to people who can make a difference in helping to realize that story, is critical, especially at the early stages, but throughout the history of your business. So if you're an already established artist, please do not assume that people know what it is you're working on. If you're an established organization, please do not assume that people, even in your circle, know what you're working on unless you directly tell them. It's critical. We oftentimes, as just human beings in this moment, look at social media as the way that we broadcast what it is that we're doing. But broadcasting is really different than narrowcasting. Narrowcasting is when you tell people who know and would potentially care about what it is that you're doing it, and that you're still doing it. Like I've been doing this work for 23 years. Sometimes I meet people. I was literally at a dinner last night with someone who was at the very first conference that we hosted at the University of Maryland 25 years ago. And he was like, "You're still doing that?" And I said, "Yes." And yeah. So this idea that just because someone knew or someone was involved doesn't mean that they're still paying attention. And don't take it personally that people in your network aren't paying attention to what you're doing. We're all living our own lives. We're all doing the things that we believe will make a difference in our individual lives, our community lives, and maybe even beyond that. And so it's really important when thinking about telling your story, thinking about who you're telling your story to, how are you telling your story? A lot of us lean on social media. There's so much noise on social media. Never assume that people that you want to see it unless you sent it to them and you ask them to comment or they left some sort of an emoji. This is the only way you know whether or not the kind of narrow casting you're doing is actually reaching the audience that you're trying to reach. Another way to know if the story that you're telling is reaching people is actually to survey them when they come to things that you do. We'll talk about that in a future episode. But it's also important in telling the story to talk about accomplishments. Why? It's not about patting yourself on the back. It's about letting people know that the thing that you're working towards, you're actually making progress towards it. Never assume that people know about the progress. Never assume that people care necessarily just because you're doing it until you talk to them and gauge whether or not this is something that actually matters to them. Does it matter enough to them to attend? Does it matter enough to them to share it? Does it matter enough to them to help support it? These are different ways that people can demonstrate caring about the work that you're doing. It's also important as you're working to tell your story, not all at the same time, but that you're making it a priority to also talk about the things you aspire to do. Like there are things that I want to do right now, 23 years into this, that I think having done this for 23 years are going to take at least another 5 years to do. And so I'm not shouting it from the rooftop what those things are, but I am talking to people who I believe will still be in positions of power or influence 5 years from now, whether they're in their current job or their current company, or they move along to someplace else. I want them to know that I've been working on this idea for a while. So when I come back to them about, the stage where it's time to really make things happen, that it's not a brand new idea to them. It's been marinating, it's been simmering, it's been brewing for a minute. And I'm able to show them the progress that I've made since the first time I talked to them about it. In a nonprofit context, this can often be your board of directors, the people that you should feel safe enough to dream out loud with, to tell them about your wildest, craziest ideas. One, to motivate them to remain invested in the current moment, because sometimes, particularly in the nonprofit space, you get so caught up in the moment, you don't leave room for people to dream about the future that you're working towards. So being able to tell your story to your board, they're the perfect first sounding board, because they're people who are volunteering their time to help often raise money or raise awareness for the work that you're doing. So getting them thinking about this thing that you want to work towards, they become the perfect sounding board for that. It could also be some of your client base or the community that you serve. It's really going to be up to you to decide who sharing accomplishments and aspirations with make the most sense with. Now, I'm going to say something that might feel a little difficult, which is the other thing you want to be able to share with people are your struggles. Why do you want to be able to share your struggles? I will be super honest with you. It's very difficult sometimes to be vulnerable enough to talk about when things are not going well. Because on some levels, justifiably, there's a fear that if you tell people things are not going well, they're going to abandon you, or they're going to think less of you, or they're going to be less motivated to help. And that's true for some people. And you got to be okay with that. That telling the truth about where you are is going to draw some people to you. It's going to repel some people from you because they're like, oh, this is a sinking ship. I need to get off. Or they might grab a hammer and some wood and start patching up a hole. You got to give people the opportunity to be able to try to help you. And I think that all three of those things, from letting people know what you're doing, letting people know what you envision as possible, and letting people know when you're struggling, are key. The reason why I said I know that it's tough for me to be able to do that, I remember the very first time we were about to close. Words Meets in Life in 23 years is almost closed 3 times. And I remember Simone Jacobson at the time telling me, Mazi, you need to send out a letter to all of your donors and supporters telling them about how tough things are right now so that they can help you. And I told Simone, because I'm part of lots of different networks with nonprofit, I've seen those emails go out from people that are desperate. And almost none of them, from my experience, got the thing they were asking people to help them with. So I was like, when people think you're sinking, they want to see if you're going to be able to swim. And so I'm not advocating for you to broadcast challenges, but I am asking for you to narrowcast who it is that you're going to be able to share, not just what is great, not just what you aspire to, but also what is difficult. Because sometimes those people that you share what's difficult with, they got solutions. They got people that can volunteer to support the development of X, Y, and Z. They have knowledge about secret funds that don't get advertised to everybody. So sometimes it's about knowing who are the people you can tell what, but not needing to hold all of what is great and what is difficult to yourself, or even just to your board. Thinking about who in the community is really invested in your success and being able to talk to those people about when challenges come, because everyone who does this work knows the challenges are going to come. Whether those are financial challenges, whether those are HR challenges, whether those are programmatic challenges. Challenges are going to come because you're doing work in the real world that people participate in, that people choose to support or not support, that funders invest in or leave. And so the reality is that if you're going to do this work, you got to be prepared for the calm seas and the rough seas because both are going to come. Um, One of the things in thinking about the value of being able to share these things is the effort to build a base of donors and partners. Why do I say building a base of donors and partners? Well, because every funder, regardless of how big or how small, will eventually leave if you're in the nonprofit space. Whether those are individuals, whether those are family foundations, whether those are corporations, every single person that will join you for this ride will eventually leave. And why will they leave? Sometimes it's because you get too big for their list of priorities. Sometimes they're not happy with the work that you're delivering. Sometimes they really just have internal processes that say, we're not going to support any organization longer than X, Y, and Z time. It's different for different people. The same thing is true for individuals. Sometimes people will sign up to become a monthly donor, and when their credit card expires, they don't sign back up. You can reach back out to them, but they might not sign back up. So you always have to be preparing to find new supporters. As soon as you get a new supporter, you need to be thinking about how you're going to replace them. Either keep them, for some period of time, but know eventually they're going to leave, and think about how you're going to replace them. I think one of the keys to being able to do this really well is not to think about people as just funders, but to think about them as partners. Partners help you dream. Partners identify other resources. Partners sometimes will help program spaces that you create for the larger community. And so thinking about how do you want to partner in your business? How do you think that partners can contribute to advancing the mission of your organization, your project, your program, your event? And really being clear about who makes a good partner, who makes a good funder, and how often are those two things intertwined. Um, it's not necessarily the case that every funder is going to be a good partner. Some people, 23 years have given us money and been like, good luck. See you in a year when you come back to tell us how things went. The more I talk to executive directors of nonprofits, they meet a lot with those people that give you money and say, see you in a year. And those people sometimes like to hear from you in 3 months, in 6 months, in 9 months, to know what you've been doing so that the next time they hear from you is not the next time you ask for money. Think about in your own life, the people that you know that reach out to you just when they need something. When you see those people calling, do you pick up the phone every single time? It's like, do I really want to meet this need? Or do I want to send them the voicemail and see what they're talking about? If people only hear from you when you need something from them, they're less likely to want to engage, because then they're not a partner. They're just a funder or a donor or material resources, as opposed to someone who's a thought partner, someone who you want to invite to bring their family out to experience the thing that you're creating, someone that you want to ask to bring their company out, especially if it's free and there's someone who helped to make it happen. Asking them to come and show off the thing that they helped support, being able to thank them at that event when you see them. People want to be thanked. People want to feel connected and involved in the things that they give to, that they volunteer with, that they're invested in. And it's up to you as the leader of an organization, of a company, to be thinking about what are all the ways that building an individual donor base is going to make a difference in your work. Now, the reason why I said individual donor base as opposed to a corporate donor base or a foundation base or a contractor base is because individuals often give smaller amounts of money, but they often stay with you longer. We did our very first individual giving campaign, I want to say way back at like year number 15. It was the vision of Mike Santini. At that time, there were things like the Ice Bucket Challenge happening around Lou Gehrig's disease. And so he had this idea that we should do a campaign, and he was like, it should be called $1 and a Dream. And we're going to ask, 1,000 people for $1. And I was like, Mike, the processing fee on $1 is like 35 cents when we use the platform that we're using. So even if we got 1,000 people to give, like, we're not raising $1,000. So I said, why don't we start at $5? And then let's use Facebook as the way that we're going to ask. And that summer we had 6 interns. And what I did, it doesn't work now because Facebook has gotten a lot better at stopping spamming, but we sent out emails to, at that time, I had 5,000 followers on Facebook. So we sent an individual email to all 5,000 of my friends. And what was surprising was that the people that decided to give upon asking were not my actual friends. They're mostly strangers, people who lived in other parts of the world who would never benefit from the existence of Words Beats in Life, but believed in it in principle because they had seen me broadcasting the story of the work that we were doing. Those individual asks were a kind of narrow casting, but I was really surprised how many of the people that I knew personally just ignored the messages and how many of the people who were strangers gave. That first year, we got, I want to say like 150 people to give. We had never asked anybody to give us money before as an individual. And the response was overwhelming. I mean, we asked close to 5,000 people and got maybe, 100, 150. To be honest, I don't remember the number, but it was just significant considering we had never asked anybody before. And that led to us thinking about fundraising from individuals in a different way. Like we started to do this event called the Breakfast of Champions, where we would invite people who had been our champions to come out and give them an award and then ask the audience to become donors to support our work. And it's about thinking about different ways to appeal to people for whom your work matters, who might not be checked in. Like now for the Breakfast of Champions, we do the premiere of our annual report video so that they get to see all the things we did since the last time we saw them. And then we ask those folks if they're willing to give again, or if they're willing to volunteer, or if they're willing to tell other people about our work. So that the fundraising is also friend raising. It's also just about community engagement and accountability, being able to say, what money we raised and where we spent it and where we maybe fell short, or maybe where we came in above what we expected. But now we need folks like you, i.e. individuals, to consider pledging their support to the organization over the course of the next year. You would be very surprised how often, and maybe I take that back. Maybe you wouldn't be surprised. I was surprised by how many people were willing to do that. The first year we did the Breakfast of Champions, we had about 95 people to come. It was a breakfast on a Friday at 8:00 in the morning. And all of my staff was like, no one's coming to that. It's on a Friday and it's before work. And people showed up. Sometimes you got to be willing to try things that could fail. Failure is a part of this process, and factoring in failure. Remember, I talked about, talking about accomplishments, talking about aspirations, and talking about struggles. That all three of those things are an important part of your story that people want to know about. And to the degree that they can help, people will help if they believe their help is going to make a difference. I know that this has been part of my own journey, part of my own life story. And I think it's important to share this with you, mostly because no one told me any of this. Like, no one told me any of this when I started about the value of just telling your story to people who might do something about it, and not telling the story for the purpose of an ask. That can come later once you actually have a relationship and someone has demonstrated that they care. But just the value in telling the story of what you've done, what you aspire to, and where you struggle. And I keep lifting up those three things because sometimes I have friends who aspire before they have accomplishment, and they're telling people about the aspiration. And the problem with that sequence of telling people about the aspiration and then coming back to talk about what you've done is usually a lot of people telling the story of the thing they aspire to do gets them all of the accolades. People are like, oh, wow, that's so amazing. I can't believe you're doing that. And they get kind of all the credit for it before it's actually happened, which becomes a demotivator for actually doing it. So sometimes you got to do the things in the dark to be able to make it happen and then invite people to be a part of it versus telling the story of the thing you aspire to. Figuring out how you can make, even small scale, the things that you want to do happen early on is critical, whether that's through sweat equity, through volunteers, through paying it out of your pocket. All of these things make a difference in the beginning. In the kind of middle phase or towards the end, or when we are where we are, we still tell our story. We do things like recap videos to be able to share with the people that weren't at things. Back at our 20th anniversary, because in 20 years, we had only had maybe 3 or 4 articles written about us until we hired a publicist. Mercy, who's our publicist now, is amazing and showed me the value of being able to invest in professionals who do the things that you feel like you need. But at year 20, we created the EQ, which is our publication that comes out twice a year to just tell our own story. Literally, it's a publication of long form stories and interviews about alumni, about recent events. This issue that I just held up was about cultural diplomacy, and it features on the cover DJ Flegg, who is a former teacher in the Words Beats in Life Academy, who was also one of the DJs at the Olympics this year for breaking. He's an amazing DJ who's done so much in this region and around the world. Being able to have him on the front cover, because he also went with us this past year to Nepal, where we got to meet folks at the Nepali Hip Hop Foundation, and they were super stoked to have Flag in their country doing DJ workshops and performing for the community. So thinking about how it is that you tell your story, whether that's Instagram stories or reels, annual reports, infographics, publications, newsletters, all these things make a difference in how it is that you're trying to get people to care and understand what it is that you're doing. Caring and understanding, like all of those are kind of mental, but then also to be able to tell a story that makes people feel what it is that you're doing, feel that it's important not only to them or to their family or their community, but to this whole experience that we're having here on this earth. How is this work making a difference in the communities that need it, that value it? Even if I personally don't benefit from it, how is it making a difference? The things like the EQ let us tell a longer story. Our newsletter, we usually try to keep it short because people don't like reading long things on their phones necessarily. Doing long form interviews like this, where I'm just talking to you about the work that we're doing, is another thing that we're trying, just to see whether or not people engage with our ability to tell our story in a longer format, and being able to tell the story of the work we do and why we do it and how it's been successful and challenging. It requires a level of vulnerability that I necessarily haven't had for most of the 23 years of doing this work. And so I'm really excited to be able to share the way that I think and what I've seen to be useful. Now, with that being said, just yesterday, I was having a conversation with one of my board members, and she told me that there's another level I got to be willing to go to with our storytelling, which was being willing to meet with individuals in their homes, to be able to go to people's homes who are in a position to become individual donors, to talk to them, to explain with them, to have them kind of measure me up, not just the work that we do, to figure out if I'm a person that's worthy of trust. Because to be honest, for 23 years, my position has been, I don't want to do that schmoozing. I really want people to be invested in the work we're doing and the results we've achieved. It's like totally in the head. But people who often are willing to cut personal checks don't just give because of their head, they give because of their heart. They want to know about the story, they want to hear about the impact. And who better to do that than the executive or a founder or a board member who's really invested, or a board member who maybe has had, benefited from your program, a young person that's benefited from your program. Being able to have people come and tell stories about how the work you've done has been transformational is key. And I'll be honest, hopefully over the course of this year, I'm going to be able to come back and talk to you about my own experience being vulnerable on an individual level, as opposed to being vulnerable on the radio or on YouTube or at an event. To be able to go into someone's house and break bread with them and answer questions and talk about what is going well and what we've accomplished, what we aspire to, and where we've struggled. That is my own next level of professional development. And I hope you'll stick around to learn more about that and share your own experiences. Remember, I've asked folks, this isn't necessarily a stream for best practices. I'm just sharing a journey that you might be able to learn from, so that it doesn't just have to be something I learned from and benefited from. Managing your relationships is going to be critical. I talked in a previous episode about growing my board. Having a board of 18 members is a test of relationship management. Being able to engage with people around their levels of interest, not being so overbearing that people feel like board service is a burden. The same thing is true for individual donors and foundations and corporations. Lots of people want to give money to lots of different things, not just you. You might have a bill that comes up every year, but everybody don't want to contribute to that bill every year. And you got to understand that and recognize the gift that they gave one time does not guarantee a gift in the future. They could still be invested. They could still be involved. They could still be a partner, but they might not be a donor. And that's okay, because sometimes people step away to give to other things or to save money. Who knows what's happening in people's lives? But they can come back if you're still around and doing the same, if not better. So be open to the fact that building a relationship is a process. It's not a destination. It really is a journey. And the last thing I want to talk about is just this idea of planning for the harvest. The harvest, I don't want to say that the harvest is just when things are going well. Like sometimes when you go to harvest your crop, you had a bad crop, and it's maybe half of it's dead, maybe all of it's dead, maybe all of it is thriving. But part of your responsibility as a person that is leading a thing is to think about how it is that you are responsible for eventually cultivating that harvest. And that cultivation requires you to water and to till and to um, take out bad plants before they kill other plants. And thinking about how you do that with people, with relationships, with stories, in a way that is engaging, that is thoughtful, that again speaks to the head, but also think about what is the heart of why it is you do what you do, and not just not the personal heart necessarily, but really how is it making a difference in the world? What are things that people tell you that inform the way you feel about your work? Talking about your feelings is critical in this space because so many people who give to charity, who volunteer for causes, are giving because they feel something, not because they think something. And so you can tell your story around logic and around numbers because there's people that matters to. But understand that many people who are going to support your work or choose not to support your work is because they don't feel it, not because they don't care about it, not because it doesn't matter to them, but because they don't really know how it is that them being involved is actually going to make a difference. I had a great conversation the other day with a would-be board member, and we were talking about, all the ways that he could be involved and the difference that he could make and how we would work with his schedule. We'd be flexible, et cetera. And he was like, all that's great, but send me the paperwork because I want to give my time to places that I know I'm going to be able to make a difference and that it's going to matter to me and that I'm going to be invested in being there and engaging. And so you got to be prepared to be able to answer those questions, to be able to give the paperwork for the folks that are operating from a headspace and recognize how it is to tell a story and to talk about aspirations and accomplishments in a way that actually gets people who want to feel the thing that you're doing. All right. Well, that's just about my time. I'm really glad that you joined me here for this episode. In thinking about planning for your harvest, think about what success looks like. Think about the challenges that you might have to overcome to achieve that success and how you might have to change what success looks like over time. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Mazi Mutafa, and this is Wednesday Wisdom, live every Wednesday as close to 4 o'clock as I can here on the Words Beats Life YouTube channel. Subscribe, like, share, and let's keep building together. Again, if you're a teaching artist in the DMV, feel free to leave a comment. I'd love to be able to connect with you to learn more about your craft and how we might be able to work together. Catch you next week. Peace, y'all.